Welcome to Misteyre Creations, and today we're doing something a little different. Sarah and I are talking with Vincent Treewell of The Weird Part. There's no script or plan other than talking about weird Wisconsin, which I went off topic a few times, sorry about that. It was a total of 2 hours and 18 minutes, which I'm breaking down into 4 parts we released over the next 4 weeks. This episode is a fun chat between friends. Please enjoy.
Did you have anything to add about Dogman?
Oh, yes. Well, just and great. I'm going to blank on her name, but I think you wrote it down here. The Wisconsin scholar who, kind of made the Beast of Bray Road, Linda Godfrey, who was one of the major, investigators on this, and that she started as a local reporter and found that the local, I want to say dog catcher, but he has an official term that's like, something a little more dignified than that. It's, the animal control officer for the township or, the area, already had a file on all these incidents. And the sheriff had a file. And that she was like, well, what's in all these files? Well, all the time people have reported werewolf-like, creatures that seemed to be not just regular wolves, even though in that area that'd be very, very surprising. Well, it wouldn't be totally unacceptable, but it'd be unusual. It's not that wilderness. It's farm country. You might see a coyote, and coyotes can get pretty big, but real large wolves are not in that area normally. And yet a lot of people had reported them. And, there's a bunch of stories, and it's still, I would say, semi-ongoing. I have had a chance to get there, and we didn't have anything happen as we drove around, but Stephen Schneider was driving, and I don't know if any of these names ring any bells, but really interesting guy that goes by the name of Recluse and does a podcast called The Farm. And he was driving. Another friend of ours, Clay Van Diver, was riding along, and he decided to play this, like on a recorder, play this audio that he'd gotten. It was from the internet, but it was fairly well credentialed, that this was supposed to be the howling voice of a werewolf in Scotland. So he's hanging out the window playing this recording, which is just, it's wild. It's this, wolfman howling sounds. We're driving around. We didn't get any reaction that I could detect. But Clay is a more psychically sensitive person, and he said, oh no, it was definitely there. It was definitely observing us. Totally felt that. I'm like, okay, that would not surprise me,
Can you imagine what the locals were thinking as they drove by?
I think they're used to it. Honestly, I think they get a lot of people. Well, they have a festival every year, and a conference anyway every year. And there is this retired college professor who owns a farm there, who I can't recall his name, but there's only one guy that fits that description, And he's taken a lot of pictures, no really good pictures of the Dogman, because it doesn't really permit itself to be photographed, you might say. That you can get blurry movement, and you can get, like, he actually put a dead deer out and put trail cams all around it. And you got movement, you got the deer carcass disappearing. In one shot it's there, in another shot it's gone. and the equipment malfunctioned constantly. So it's interesting. He's got a lot of material.
That brings to mind legends of werewolves. They are said to have superhuman speed, and I mean faster than any wolf or human could move. And when you think of it that way, they could just run through, grab it, and be gone because
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
they're incredibly strong. So you'd see a blur on the screen, and that would be it.
So yeah, it's interesting. He's still in business. He's still researching this, and every year he lets people come there. You do have to pay a small fee, but it's not much. And then he'll show you his pictures and his footage, and I mean, he said he's seen it many times.
I would love to, because we're not paranormal investigators. We're more like witchy people. So I would love to find out what a traditional offering to the spirits are. I'm not sure if that area. I got Ojibwe, and it's Ho Chunk, were the tribes that I saw in Wisconsin. So I'd love to find out what a traditional offering is and like leave it an offering out there and just sit out there all night and see what happens.
Ojibwe, it would be sweetgrass and tobacco would be the two ones that sweetgrass more.
And I don't know anything about the Ho Chunk.
Like when you prepare your meal in your home, you take a plate out to the ancestors. And so a lot of these cryptids are ancestors or considered part of the ancestry, especially if in their background they have brujo or medicine men in their family, because they were known to be able to shapeshift and so that's how it would be, and it's just food.
I would love to do that and see what that brings, rather than like taking the trail cams and the obnoxious equipment that beeps and flashes and see what
be a little bit low key and see what happens. Well, this is my thinking. A lot of encounters that are on the aggressive side, the human element in it, they're scared or they're aggressive themselves. And animals, particularly dogs, if you're talking about dogmen, dogs will be aggressive if you're aggressive. They will be meek if you're meek, and vice versa. But if they're able to see that you're weak and they can gain dominance, sometimes if it's an alpha, it will want to gain dominance over you. And especially if these things are psychically endowed, they know that you're scared, and they know that you feel inferior to it, and it will be aggressive to you, or it will seem aggressive. But if you're able to go in, like Sarah said, with an offering and being more on equal grounds and respectful, what the outcome of that would be.
I wonder. That's very interesting. I don't know what would happen with that. I certainly don't know what would happen with that. It would probably be very interesting though, And I don't know of any incident. I'm not saying there isn't one, but I don't know of any incident where they actually physically hurt somebody. It seems more like they've scared the hell out of many people. But when it comes to actually like lashing out at you, I don't think they really do that.
Yeah, like all the Dogman stories, like they're definitely scary, but a lot of times you're out in the woods in the dark. I mean,
there's one.
Is there?
One that I know of. And it was a kid in Ohio. I think it was it might be Euphemet, I'm not sure.
And we listen to so many podcasts.
Anyways, he jogs every day because he was.
Oh, wait,
he was.
he didn't. I know what you're talking about. He didn't actually hurt him.
No, there's an instance where it grabbed his leg and cut his leg. You know how a dog will try to trip you up by grabbing your leg with its
Oh yes.
its mouth, and it's not trying to hurt you, but it's more playing with you. He was
Oh
running.
yeah, to knock you down.
Yeah, he was running, and this thing chased him because he was running. Typical dog behavior. If you're running and they want to
It's
chase
wild.
you, and he was yelling at it, and it grabbed him and tripped him up, and
Wow.
that leg and his leg was cut from its claws, but it stopped. It didn't go and attack him. It stopped.
Exactly. It could have mauled him or something.
Yeah, it was like when that instance. It doesn't seem like it was aggressive. It seemed like it was playing with him. And,
wow.
And when he got hurt, it backed off and was like, "Oh, sorry," and then disappeared into the corn.
Wow. Wow, that would be really wild. that wow. But yes, again, it didn't like really harm him, you know.
Yeah, it wasn't
So
going out to kill him. It was just wanting to play.
Very dog-like behavior, yes.
Yeah.
Huh.
Now, there was a thing on YouTube last week, or was it this week? Last week.
What was the story?
It was Dogman again. And these kids were in this old power station that was defunct.
Oh, that's bedtime stories. Are those real stories though?
Yeah, it's accounts from people. Whether or not they're true, we don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if bedtime stories are just cool horror stories or if they're real accounts.
But by the
there's a lot of stuff out there, yeah.
Yeah, by the sounds of this was a report from an actual person about what he had experienced when he was a kid. So it sounds kind of like that. Whether or not it's a true story, it got attacked by wild dogs because the wild dogs were known to attack people in the area. And this pack of wild dogs were chasing it, went over a mound, and it turned on them and started beating the crap out of them. And then went after the boys when it noticed the boys were there. But instead of attacking them, it started talking to them.
Oh, wow.
Again, the talking bit. And then a train went by and scared it, and it ran off.
That is really interesting.
Any more on Dogman that you'd like to?
That's probably about what I know about this subject at this point in time. Other than there's certainly a big focus in Wisconsin. They do exist throughout the South and in Michigan, and I tend to think they're all over the place, you know, in like all the different states, or at least most of them.
Well, Eastern Canada, Quebec and New Brunswick, and into Nova Scotia, into the valley, the loup-garou, which is French, a French version of werewolf, but it's more a wolf that can become a man.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, it's not like a werewolf. It's a wolf were.
Oh, that's interesting. I've heard of that, but I don't have a lot of detail. Wow, that's interesting. That's even kind of more amazing than a person becoming a wolf. You know, it seems there'd be more skills you'd have to learn. You know,
that brings to mind the animal people of the indigenous stories. They, when you think of it, originally they were more animal than human in their mannerisms and whatnot. And over time, because of the intrusion of more Europeans, they probably would have developed the ability to look more human and be able to hide their presence more.
My first thought when you mentioned animal people was that some archaeologists have found what appears to be at least pre-human hominids in the Americas. And like, Homo erectus and the, really ancient proto-humans. And I wonder if, the people that are now the Native American indigenous people actually encountered some of those, pre-humans, and they would have appeared as animal people,
Yeah.
because I know they've been here a lot longer than anybody thought. They knew, but
There's always
it was
people
generally
that came
thought.
before too. So
Yeah.
like you have the I can't remember the name of the tribe, but they're like Helsut or Helsuk. They're 14,000 years old. Yours, you said you saw one that was 23,000.
Yeah.
And the Moon-eyed people, we don't know who they are.
Yeah.
But the indigenous of that area say they came before. And then we have the Adena and Hopewell. So it could be that the indigenous people are not migrants, that they've always been here. But it's been so long in the history that they
Well, when you have an oral tradition, which is what in the indigenous of the world have kept. Now, a lot of scientists, a lot of people discount their ability to remember things accurately.
I have
Now, there is an instance that's been proven where the Aborigine people recanted a story of the dreaming that told of the location of an island in its accurate area of 10,000 years ago. And that's because they passed down the stories. And they were able to accurately locate that island based on how the distance of time and whatnot, how the land masses would have changed and moved. They were able to locate this island that no one had ever found before.
Wow.
Based on that. So there's a lot more truth to these stories, even though they may be shined a little bit to make it interesting to the child, but they're more methods of making it stick in the mind rather than truly embellishing the story to the point that it changes it. It's like
Very
a
interesting.
mind games that you play to learn to read and maintain.
Yeah, a mnemonic, yeah.
So,
and that's how folk magic was traditionally passed down. And I just listened to the Ghost Stories guys podcast, and they introduced, can't remember his name, but he's a native Hawaiian. And when his mom was teaching him like the stories and the old ways, he was to listen. Like, you don't write it down, you listen.
So when
really
you
embed that in your memory,
yeah, when you have these people telling these stories of these animal people, or sorry, I'm further away from the mic, so that's probably why it's when the animal people, they're talking about the animal people, and you're saying Homo erectus and that, there's instances of people, because we interbred with Neanderthals, and we interbred with whatever hominid was in our area, and those offspring, the genes are passed down. And so some people have more hominid features. And so you end up with the wild man sightings, and then Bigfoot comes out of that. And then we get into the scientific thoughts and egregores and tulpa and that sort of thing, where maybe it was these hominids that people were seeing, but now because everyone's thinking it's this huge creature, it is this huge creature that we're seeing because we're
Yes.
meeting it.
Kind of a co-creation where you get what you expect, or at least see what you expect.
Yeah. And well, one of the things we did for when you're talking to someone who's had a traumatic experience, we did an experiment with how when you're passing a verbal cue along to people, how that changes over. We had like 100 people sit down in a circle, and we pass the story around. And by the time it gets back to the beginning, it's completely different because
Yes.
everyone would remember it differently. And so when someone goes through a traumatic experience, they're going to remember things differently than what actually happened. And so you have to peel back the layers.
Well, that's like that false eyewitness
False
like
eyewitness.
controversy.
Yeah. And like you can
You see a guy get robbed. There's 5 witnesses. Each witness sees something different.
like you and your wife, she saw
Yes,
a
yes.
Bigfoot and you saw a deformed bear.
Yes, yes. Yeah. You can see two totally different things, or one person sees nothing and the other sees something, and it can be all different permutations. And you're right. Traumatic, especially if it's intense, you don't remember it all at once. You remember things pop up and, oh, I forgot this actually happened, and that makes reporting anything rather difficult. You know. Yeah.
So
And also you have to remember like MUFON and stuff. They're not writing reports honestly. They like someone sees a UFO and they say, "Oh, also my house is haunted and I saw a Bigfoot." They won't put that in the report.
see,
That's
Yeah.
been a real factor with
Yeah.
a number of organizations, yeah, that are just into this one thing, but there's all these other things that are happening around you, and it shouldn't be separated into silos like that, you know,
well,
but it frequently is, you know.
as a former sheriff, when you went in to investigate a crime, would you discount stuff that was oddball, or would you put that into all of that into your report and figure out what pieces worked for the situation?
Things that were, I'm sorry, I didn't catch what you said. Things that were,
Oddball, strange.
Oddball, strange,
oh, okay.
like
I never really ended up having to have that situation. I didn't get the jobs that I didn't do a whole lot of investigation. I came in to do investigation and ended up doing other things, being a court bailiff and stuff. But when I did do investigations, yeah, you want to get a wide net, but no, everything's not going to end up in the report because you're aiming usually to make a criminal case. And so you're going to leave out many things that you have to pick and choose what's relevant to what you are going to put in a report that's going to go to court.
Mhm.
And it is a judgment call, a lot of what you're trying to do, just because of, you know, the stakes involved and everything. But yeah, I think I take your point that, yeah, there's a lot more to the whole story, and we would have to really narrow it down to, you know, who did what and what was illegal and what everything else doesn't really matter, you know.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the perspective that we had at the time, you know. But it, you know, there is are you sometimes leaving out important things? It's possible. That's always a danger. Yeah, it's absolutely a danger.
Well, what happens quite often is you exhaust one avenue of thought in an investigation, and you have to go back to the beginning and follow the other leads that you didn't, because, well, this guy had an alibi, you searched it out, you proved that he couldn't have done the crime, and then you have to go to the other situations where you have another guy that could have committed the crime but had an alibi, but you find out later that they didn't, or they lied, or something along that lines. There's always parts of the investigation where you're going to have that core bunch of information, even though it doesn't end up in the report. It's still in the file or the box.
Oh, yes.
With all the evidence in it, and it's all the layers. There's layers in every story, and
Oh, yes.
and so
If you don't look at multiple suspects, you're not really doing an investigation. To be blunt, you know.
Yeah.
In anything where there's an unknown, you know, anything more than somebody saying, "I know who did this because that's my boyfriend" or something. Anything more complex than that, you need to have multiple suspects and look at all the possibilities. And that's a real investigation as opposed to just tunnel visioning, which is always a danger, you know.
Yeah, and I feel like that's the problem with the disclosure people. They are set on one thing,
narrative,
and it's like the same conversations that they had in the 40s and 50s, and it's like, and now it's the same thing, and they're like, no, it's gonna happen, it's gonna be nuts and bolts, this is what it's gonna be.
But see, it comes back to the phenomena defies that type of investigation, that type of thought process, because you say it's one thing, it may be that one instance is that, but there's 100 other instances where there's a rainbow of differences that make it so that scientifically you can't prove that this is this, even though it's all of that as well.
The phenomenon refuses to be defined and refuses to be boxed in. And if you try to come up with even a perfect theory, it'll throw you a curveball that shows that it's not always that. It's something else. And yeah, it's an ongoing thing. But yes, every time you think you've got it, it'll give you something totally different and kind of, you know, throw that theory completely out the window. And if there is an intelligence behind it, and I take kind of a dim view. I don't take it off the table, but I'd be very surprised if the disclosure movement really came up with much. I just feel that what we're dealing with in the broad sense of the paranormal, even just specifically UFOs, is something that's not going to be ships that you can take apart or alien bodies. It's much more, for lack of a better term, spiritual. And I think the people who are looking to get that ship with the dead alien in it are going to be disappointed. I don't think that's really how it works. You know, I think, however, that has been a very effective cover for many, you know, high-tech military projects. And that's always a good cover, and it's probably aliens. And I think there's a lot of, you know, special effects, stagecraft to continue that way of thinking. And, you know, have people look over here for the aliens, because we're really working on this really fast super jet that does things, you know, that people don't think it can do. And we don't want to talk about that, because then other countries would know about that. But look for the aliens. We're going to tell you some really good stuff and then it never really goes anywhere. That's my 2 cents. I don't take it off the table, but it's not my first, second, or even third idea of what this really is.
I listened to Alien Files. It's Parcast Network. It might be extraterrestrial. They do a paranormal one, and they like to show on the government and the UFOs. They had an interesting take on the Nova Scotia UFO crash. So in what's the town? A Nova Scotian small fishing town had a Shag Harbor.
Yeah.
Had a UFO crash, and there was foam, and the fishermen were really worried because they have plane crashes from time to time. So they all went out there and they saw foam, and then very quickly the US and Canada military both came out to the area with the Parcast Network podcast. There were some very specific experts that have since come out and talked, and one guy said it would be very strange for them to call me for anything other than an airplane. Like, what he did was very specific to airplanes, and basically they get enough circumstantial evidence that it wasn't a UFO. It was probably the Arrow project, which was a hovering airplane that Canada was working on that never came to fruition. And it was really interesting because shortly after Shag Harbor, I believe it was Boston, part of the dockyards was shut down for a highly classified boat docking in. So it almost sounds like it crashed and they had to take it back to where
the Arrow was the public. It was top secret, but it was the closest to the public of all the projects that they were working on at that time in Canada.
And the interesting thing is when the incident actually happened, in the 60s, you'd be like, oh, this wasn't a UFO. This was just flares. The US always did that. Canada did not do that. They did not try to do anything to discourage the UFO. They let it flame up, maybe even encouraged it.
Like you were saying,
because that gives people something else to look for, and not this.
But
I didn't know.
One of the projects was a hovering. The jet would hover, but they were working on a jet that would go out into space and be able to come back in. And so now we have those. But they were working on that technology, and they were working on a type of stealth technology that borderlined the Philadelphia project. And all of that went so far underground in Canada around that time.
Sorry, he's going way off topic from Wisconsin.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Sometimes it's just gotta flow, but that is fascinating. I didn't know this until the last year, but and I gotta give credit to Aaron Gullius from the Saucer Life. You've heard of Rendlesham Forest, right? That incident, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Have you heard of the Cash Landrum incident?
Sounds vaguely familiar.
These two women, one named Cash, one named Landrum, saw a UFO being escorted by unmarked helicopters, and they ended up with radiation burns. Okay. What I didn't know was that Rendlesham and Cash Landrum happened within 24 hours.
Oh, wow.
And I had no idea. And he was linking it to a high-tech aircraft that could fly from Texas to Britain and back within 24 hours easily, probably a lot less, and gave these women radiation burns and did whatever they did over in Rendlesham. And
crazy.
the timing blew my mind. It was less than 24 hours.
This was part 2 of 4. We continued our chat about Dogman, then we got into UFOs, and ended with government conspiracies. Stay tuned for part 3. We'll see you next time.